This is the MobaPad Chi2 HD mechanical controller. On this channel, the main thing I like to look at is whether I can use this for games that really require accurate use of the D-pad for things like fighting games. And what's really interesting about this controller is that it has a clicky D-pad. In fact, not only does it have a clicky D-pad, it also has clicky buttons. We shall see how this MobaPad HD Chi2 mechanical pad feels for fighting games. By the way, full disclaimer, MobaPad did send this controller to me for the purposes of making this video, but I don't have to say anything specific and all opinions are my own. And I also get to keep this controller at the end of the review free of charge. Alright, it's time to check out the MobaPad here. I've got my Nintendo Switch running a fighting game, and I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what you can expect from this controller. As you can see, it's very similar in look to the official Nintendo Switch Pro controller. In fact, I think they may have gone and made it look almost exactly the same in terms of dimensions and also the shape. The main stuff, you've got the analog sticks, but these are apparently using Hall effect sensors, which will hopefully make it last a little bit longer. Then you can move on to the D-pad, which I did mention before. It is clicky. It does move back and forth like this without having to lift your thumb off, which means that it does have a pivot in the middle. Some D-pads you can push all the way down and actuate all the buttons at the same time, and the only way to put new inputs into the D-pad is to lift your thumb off and then press it again in a different place. So far, so good. Also, while we're looking at the D-pad, you can also see that you can actually remove the D-pad entirely and replace it with this. This is the circle pad. It only goes on one way. You can't put it on sideways like this. Moving on to the action face buttons, you've got the Y, X, B, A buttons in this traditional Nintendo layout. These have clicky switches inside. There's actually about a millimeter of travel, or maybe 0.6 millimeters of travel, and then at a certain point you'll feel a click, and then it will continue to go another 1 millimeter. It feels a lot more like what you would be using in something like keyboard switches, where you have a bit of travel before the click, then you have the click, and then you have a little bit of travel after it as well. And that is the same for all four of these buttons, and as far as I can tell, they feel pretty much identical. They are kind of tough to press, or rather, they're not tough to press, but they require a significantly larger amount of force to push them all the way down compared to something like membrane buttons, which basically once you've given enough force to actuate it, it kind of pops its way down the rest of the way. Other things to look at on the front of the controller, you've got the plus button and the minus button. You've also got the standard stuff. You've got your screenshot button here, and you've got your home button, which will bring you back to the main menu. Before we talk about these two interesting buttons down here, let's have a look at the top of the controller. You've also got R1 and R2, L1 and L2. These are not analog triggers. They do look like they've got a fair amount of travel, but they click. Okay, they don't actually have analog travel. These are digital buttons. Here there's an M1 button and an M2 button. Now you can actually set these to be any button almost any button you want on the controller using the app, or you can set them to macros, and unfortunately you can't set the macro in the app. Hold this button down for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. And then you'll feel a little vibration, and then the controller has actually changed color. You can't see it because it's too bright for my camera, but it's actually shining purple. And then in the game you can do a little input, something like that, and then you can actually save that to this control button here by pressing the button after it. And now I've gone back to a white color, which means that when we're in the game you can actually just press that button now on the back like so, and it will play back the macro for you. But as you can see, even though I recorded that together with you on camera, pressing the button has not actually input it at the exact same speed or in the same way as I did it. So let's just try that again. I'm going to do the input and then I'm going to press the button. Alright, let's try that now. If I press this button, let's see if it plays the macro for me. It did a different... It did a different super combo for me. So that is one of the things you need to watch out for these pad controllers that say that they can program macros. If they don't have an app that allow you to program the inputs very specifically and the amount of timing in between and the intervals and that sort of thing, then it's very possible that having to do the recording of the macro in real time might not actually play out properly. Here on the left, you also have a turbo button. So you press them at the same time, and then after I press, you can see all I have to do is hold down the button, and you can even see that the logo is now flashing. You just hold it down and you get turbo inputs. Supposedly I can press it again together and I'll get a different form of turbo. Basically I can toggle it on and then press it once to turn it off. Really what we want to talk about here is how does it feel to actually play. Now it's kind of nice in general having clicky buttons, and I think a lot of people in theory think that they want clicky buttons on their pad controllers, but as you know, if you've been following my channel, I generally don't like having clicky buttons on the face buttons. I just feel like I want the attack to come out immediately, and I don't want to think about at what point it actuated. I don't even need to know at what point it actuated. I just need to press it, and it's like a percussive instrument, like a drum. Like I hit it, and that's when the button came out. Click, click, click. I want forward, down, down, forward. I felt 3 separate clicks. So in general, I tried to get used to this pad to do combos, and it's okay, but what I found was really difficult was not my main basic combo, but down, forward, diagonal like this, and then roll from this position to down, down, back, back. And when you roll a half circle like this, sometimes it can miss the down input, and I found that on this controller it seems to do it every single time. I sometimes get the down input in between, and then sometimes I get nothing in between. Like for example, like you can see it right now. You can see my thumb exactly what I'm doing. I'm not trying to trick you or anything. It's just sometimes the down input is not coming out. Okay, kind of fluffed up the combo there, but you can see that it is possible if you're being very careful. It's not as bad right now as when I was testing it before though. One thing that is working really well on this controller is I'm not getting accidental jumps. Now this is something that's really actually quite difficult to get right on a pad controller. A lot of people have tried, and even though the D-pad is like almost perfect, it'll like still give you accidental jumps. But on this controller, I'm actually trying on purpose to make it give me accidental jumps. If I just test it by pressing forward only, you can see I'm only getting dashes like this. I'm not getting any accidental jumps. So I'm actually happy about the D-pad in that regard. One more thing I'll point out about this controller is that it does use the Xbox and also the Nintendo layout, which is the sort of goofy layout where the analog stick is up here on the left, but it's down here on the right. I still bump the analog stick, which will give you other inputs. So I could just show you here. I'm using the D-pad for inputs down here, but if I accidentally bump the analog stick while I'm pressing the D-pad, you can see you can technically use both of these controls at the same time. So if I were to give you my overall opinion of the MOBA pad, the H2 Chi2 mechanical controller as they call it, basically it's got quite a few functions that you might expect from a pro controller, but it doesn't really present them in a super pro way. The app is quite confusing to use. There are a number of spelling errors. There's also a firmware upgrade available for this pad, but it just straight up didn't work for me. It just said downloading firmware, okay, firmware update failed. But on a basic level, it does actually do quite a few things nicely. It has a pivot on the inside of the D-pad, and it doesn't have accidental jumps, which is a big one. The only issue is that it does skip down when you're going from a down forward position to a down back position. Even if you're not doing it very fast, it seems kind of inconsistent and just kind of skips the input. When it comes to these face buttons, I also feel like it just takes a little bit too much effort. The spring that they've put in here, whatever the switches that they're using, it's too much work, and my thumbs really did hurt after practicing with this controller for a long time. Even the clicky D-pad, I like that it's clicky, but it's also a little bit too much pressure. Turbo is a useful function, and finally there's the macro button, and basically my advice to you is don't use it. So, hats off to you, MOBA pad. Not exactly my favorite controller for fighting games, but I'm impressed with what it can do. The app needs work though. Please make the app better, and don't have dialogue boxes come up in Chinese. I switched the app to English, and if it comes up with Chinese prompts and I don't know what it says, then there's really not much else I can do. Listen up everyone, that's all for the MOBA pad. It's actually kind of a cool controller, and it is really nice to have clicky buttons and a clicky D-pad. However, I'm not 100% convinced that that's what I would want in a fighting game controller. Now, they're not marketing it as a specific fighting game controller, but that is kind of what we do here on this channel. If you're going to be using it on your Nintendo Switch for casual gaming, probably everything you need. But remember, if you're using it not on the Switch, you're going to be plugging it into your PC as well. This is not a pad that has analog triggers, so it's going to be kind of useless for things like racing games. Anyway, that's all I've got time for. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe, like the video if you haven't done so already, and comment below. Do you like clicky face buttons? Do you think that actually is a good thing, or do you think that kind of just gets in the way for something especially like fighting games? Let me know in the comments section below. If you like controllers for Nintendo Switch, be sure to check out this video next, because I've got plenty of controllers that I think you're going to love checking out for things like your Nintendo Switch, but also able to run on your PC or things like your Steam Deck or your Asus ROG Ally. That's all I've got time for today. I've been NihongoGamer. I'll see you real soon.